Jake, what are some of the key strategies that you employ to successfully manage large project teams, particularly when kind of multiple partner firms are involved, which I know you deal with a lot?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the biggest thing is really clearing the path to let our team do the work. We want to provide the framework and the guardrails for them to work within. Tangibly, that's, your project management plan, scopes, schedules, budgets, all of those things.
Are you an architect or engineer that needs to manage projects with large teams of people? Well, you've come to the right place. In this episode, I have with me Jake Borchers. Jake is a licensed PE, PMP, Senior PM, and Vice President at WSP USA. And Jake manages large project teams. And in this episode, he's going to give us some strategies for how to best lead these large project teams to deliver the best projects for your clients and your communities. Before we dive in, we'd like to recognize our sponsor for this episode, PPI, a leader in engineering exam prep for the FE and PE exams. PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the FE and PE exams the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for FE and PE exam prep. Now let's dive into today's episode. Right now, I'd like to welcome our guest on for today. Jacob Borchers is a PE, PMP, Senior Project Manager and Vice President at WSP USA. Jake, welcome to the AEC Project Management Podcast.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Really excited for the conversation.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. So why don't you start off, Jake, by telling us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got to the position you're at today at WSP.
Yeah, so born and raised in Nebraska, the promised land, as I like to call it. Early on growing up, really thought I wanted to be an architect, to be honest with you, and then realized kind of in my high school years that my aptitudes were better suited to math and science than art, so kind of pivoted into the engineering realm and then attended the University of Nebraska, and then graduated from the university in 2004, and then straight out of college came down to Wichita. At the time, it was Parsons Brinkerhoff. It's now morphed into WSP, but, been down here almost a little over 20 years now. Really started in roadway design in my career and just have been really fortunate to work with a great group of people that have really invested and mentored in me to help me grow and provide me those opportunities to be where I am today. So very thankful for those opportunities.
That's great. And I know, Jake, in the consulting world, kind of your role and responsibilities as a project manager can certainly evolve over time, right? Like you start by managing a couple of tasks, Then maybe you take on a small project and so on and so forth. And now as vice president, can you talk a little bit about how kind of your approach and role in project management has kind of evolved over the years?
Yeah, I would say early on, everything was really focused on the metrics. So it was, what can I do to beat whatever financial goals we've set for the task, to come in under budget, ahead of schedule, really focusing on all of those things, which are important, obviously. But I think over time, I've really realized that more than, driving hard on schedule and budgets and finances, making sure we're taking care of our people that are working for us, right? If we drive hard and drive our folks to the point where nobody wants to work with you anymore, you're not going to be very successful as a project manager. So that's really been my shift. I can think back to some of those early days when leading a task or a project, if I would get an email from the client to the owner, it was, I'm going to drop everything and I'm going to respond right now. Not everything is a fire. Not everything is an emergency. So for me, that shift to understand how to prioritize and make things fit in the right realm has been really important for me and key to that shift in really understanding project management as a whole, really leaning on, that Eisenhower matrix, right? What's the priority, what's urgent, what's not urgent, what's not important. And aside from, helping to prioritize and a little bit more structure in how we do things. It's also helped secondarily, kind of unintentionally, but it really helps grow that next level of engineers, because that allows us, and it really forces us to delegate, some of those things to them and provide them opportunities as well to get some experience and exposure to the management side of things as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I really like that idea of prioritization and the importance of that. I mean, we do a lot of PM development, PM training with firms across the country, public and private sector. And I think that that's one of the bigger challenges of PMs is everyone has a long list of things to do. The question is, what's the proper order for you to execute on those tasks? Because I was saying this in one of our trainings yesterday, you could have a list of 20 things to do and you could do 18, but they could be not impactful. And at the end of the day, you haven't accomplished much, but you could start your day by doing the two most impactful and have had a wonderful day by, 10 a.m. So that's a critical thing. And I also like what Jake said, which is kind of like early in your career, it's kind of like a lot more task management. And then it goes into probably a lot more people leadership, right? As you grow in your career, vice president or, senior project manager. And I think that that's something that I always feel, and I probably said this on every episode so far, the biggest misnomer with project management is that the term project management excludes the term people, which is basically what we have to deal with every day, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, the public, and everyone else. So developing those skills are so important. So Jake, what are some of the key strategies that you employ to successfully manage large project teams, particularly when kind of multiple partner firms are involved, which I know you deal with a lot?
Yeah, I think really from my perspective, the biggest thing is really clearing the path to let our team do the work. We want to provide the framework and the guardrails for them to work within. Tangibly, that's, your project management plan, scopes, schedules, budgets, all of those things. But really getting some of those, I call it minutia, that's not a great word for it, but, getting some of that stuff out of their way to let them focus on in our case, design projects, right? These guys, we're bringing in subject matter experts as part of our team. Let's let them focus where they're best used, which is the subject matter, and let them get to work and do their thing, really. Tangibly also, it's really being proactive, looking, 3 to 4 to 5 steps ahead. I really hate being on the critical path with anything. That's one of my goals every day, is to stay off of critical path. So, look at the next week, 2 weeks, month, whatever, to make sure that the team has in place the tools and the information they need and the decisions from the owner and our stakeholders to be able to continue to do their work, without the slowdowns. So.
Yeah, I really like that philosophy. As for leadership and project management, this idea of, removing barriers, right? Like, I always say when you're checking in with your team members, one of the questions can be, how can I, what are you trying to accomplish today? And how can I help you? Right? Like, how can I make that easier for you? And I think just the visual that I get when Jake talks about that is just imagine like a pathway with a big boulder in the middle and you're trying to remove it or lessen it or make it easier for your people to get around that because they're going to face challenges. And, you don't want to get into the details of the projects as the project manager, but you definitely want to help them, make it easier for them to execute on kind of the project deliverables. So I think that that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I like what you just said. I think the way I like to think of it is your job is to design the project. My job is to make sure you can do your job. Right? It's to get all the stuff out of the way to let you shine. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's important to let them know that too, right? So that they feel comfortable saying, if I got a problem, I may want to bounce it off Jake because he told me that he's going to help me kind of try to resolve any problems that come up, type of thing. So I think it's important to communicate that. So in terms of project teams, Jake, how do you kind of ensure that your team is built for success from early on in a project?
Well, it's going to sound cliche, but you're really going to start with the right people, right? You've got to put the right people together in the right places to be able to be successful. And part of that is understanding the personalities of your team leaders and your discipline leads on your projects, making sure that they can mesh and coexist and be successful working together. Sometimes managing those personalities can be more difficult than some of the technical aspects on an engineering project. Nobody, at least I didn't. They didn't teach that in school, how to work with folks and some of those softer issues. It was all technical focus. So it's been something, I think is really important in this industry is those tools of how to work with people, manage different personalities, putting folks in the right place to be successful. Part of that is, also understanding your owner and your clients, right? Are they going to work well with the team that we've picked? If not, maybe we use some different team members or put them in a position, in a role that's not as forward-facing with the client to make sure that we don't have those clashes throughout that can be, detrimental to the project.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'm sure that some of our listeners are thinking, because I get this question all the time in our PM programs, is, sometimes I might have a team of 3, 4, 5 people and I can't choose who that team is. And my advice to them is always, and you kind of got this too, Jake, is putting people in the right seats, right? Yep. You may have 4 or 5 people, but do you have them doing the right things based on their skill sets, right? And so if you're limited in terms of who's available to you, you really have to dig into those work styles, those personalities, their skill sets, and understand them so you can kind of deploy them in the right areas. And of course, over time, you're going to work with other people, whether you're working with sub-consultants or agencies, and you're going to have to kind of manage those other people who may also serve as part of your team. So I think just getting to understand people is such an important part of project management so you can make sure that you really are putting the right people in the right seats. That's critical.
Agreed.
So Jake, what are some of the things that you've implemented to kind of create an environment where your team can be their best? I mean, you mentioned a few things, but I think that's really what we're trying to do is create an atmosphere where the team members can thrive.
Yeah, I think so. I think it starts, at the beginning to set those expectations and to be clear with our team of, here's where we're going to the project, and this is what I expect of you, and here's what you can expect of me. It kind of goes back to, I'm going to expect you to do your job and meet all the deliverables for the owner and the client. You can expect me to support you, give you the tools and the opportunities to do that in the right forms and in the right ways. And then, once we've set those expectations, we talked about some of the frameworks of the management plans and the QC plans and communications and all of those things. And then it's really just creating that environment and letting your folks have the freedom to do their work and not micromanage and not look over their shoulder, right? You've picked these people because they are the best at what they do. They're subject matter experts. They're great in this field. Why would I want to then dictate how they do their job? Right? It's I think sometimes as engineers, we try to micromanage and control everything just so that we can say, we're in control. I think that's one of the hardest things for us, at least for me personally, was kind of letting go of some of that control and putting trust in somebody else. But I think that's so important to be able to do that, to set your team up and let them work in an environment where they know that they have the freedom to bring solutions that maybe are a little bit out of the box or innovative, but they can do that and find ways to be successful and know that everybody's opinion, whether it's the intern that's here for 3 months over the summer or a senior engineer who's been here for 30 years, your opinion's going to carry the same weight as far as finding the right solution. Sometimes those solutions come in places we wouldn't expect them to come from. So to be able to give that openness in that environment to do that, I think is great. One of the other things that's really important for me is showing appreciation for the team. It's a lot of work and a lot of hours and a lot of sacrifices that they put in to make our projects run and be successful. So to show that appreciation, whether it's, internal celebrations or what have you, but also I think just as important, probably more important, is externally showing that appreciation to your team, in front of your client, in front of your owner, to let your folks know that, hey, we've got your back and we're excited about the work that you've done, whether you work for my firm or another firm. Right? We're all one team. That logo doesn't mean anything to me when I'm working on a project. So to know that, and I think when you provide that environment, your folks are really more motivated and invested, I think, to really drive for success.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I guess a couple of things there just to hit on. One of them being what Jake just said, I think is really important when you work on teams with different stakeholders, right? Sub-consultants, outside vendors, whatever the case may be. You really, as the PM, have to get people to unite as one team, which can be a little bit challenging. But, I think that tone is obviously set with the PM, right? And having that, you need to set that tone. Absolutely. And I really like the other thing that Jake said about the idea that, this is how I'd like the project to look at the end, but I'm not going to necessarily tell you what path to take to get there. Right. Yep. You're giving people some autonomy in terms of the way they carry out their work, but you're making it very clear in the type of product that we want to ultimately execute on and deliver to the client, which is helpful, right? Because you're kind of showing them the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, but you're not telling them exactly how to get to it. So they don't feel like they have to work a certain way. They can kind of use some of their own skill sets and make some of their own decisions. But of course, going back to what we said earlier, if they do run into something, they can come to the PM and say, hey, listen, I got a little hiccup here. Can you give me some advice on this? Can you help me out? So I think all of that, setting those expectations and that communication is so important on teams and project management, especially like we talked about teams with people from other organizations as well. Makes it even a little bit more challenging, but can also be exciting as a PM.
Right. Yep.
So Jake, let's try to apply some of what we talked about to one of your actual projects. You're working on the K96 improvements project in Wichita. Talk about how your team's collaborative efforts on that project have, contributed to the overall success of that project.
Yeah, this is a really exciting project. We're really thrilled to be part of. A little background, K96, if you're not familiar with Wichita, is essentially the bypass on the northeast side of town. It's about a 10-mile, 4-lane freeway with 7 to 8 interchanges that really serve the northeast part of town. Northeast Wichita has really grown and really just exploded with growth over the past several years since the original freeway was built in the mid-90s. And because of that, as the area continues to grow, that infrastructure isn't meeting the needs of the community anymore. So this project is going to expand K96, from its current 4-lane facility to a 6-lane freeway, reconfigure several of the interchanges throughout there. But from a collaboration standpoint, it's been really great from us on the design team and with our owners. And because we're in the city of Wichita, we've had the city of Wichita, and because it's a state highway, it's KDOT, the Kansas DOT, have been the major stakeholders. But, we've been able to be collaborative and bring everybody together and work through the process in such a great way, and have come up with some really innovative solutions that are new to Wichita from a engineering and interchange configuration perspective that we probably wouldn't have got through if we'd have just kind of gone off by ourselves as a design team and proposed some different solutions, as opposed to working with both the state and the city throughout the whole process.
That's great. And again, that really speaks to that collaborative effort that you want to have on your projects, because when you have a collaborative effort, you get a lot of diverse perspectives and ideas,
Yep.
And you don't necessarily know where the right idea is going to come from, or the one that you actually end up implementing, but you're leaving kind of those channels open to get those different ideas. And that's valuable in today's world. So you obviously work on very large scale projects, working at a large firm. You work with a lot of other companies. What are some of the challenges that you faced when you manage these large scale projects, and how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, maybe lean on the 96 project a little bit and some of those recent examples. The first one's kind of from a scale perspective. This is one of the larger transportation projects that the state's done, especially here in the South Kansas region. So just that scale that drove our decisions on how big of a design team and how many partner firms we needed to do. And because that design team was a little bit bigger than what we would typically work with, we've really had to be intentional with those collaboration tools and efforts. What tools are we going to put in place? What procedures to share data back and forth across firms, and to pull in resources from not only WSP offices from across the region, but other firms' offices from outside of Wichita. So it's been really important to do that. And I think when we do those things, it's important that the team understands, obviously, that we're going to use them and what that process looks like, but why are we going to use them? What's the benefit for them to use all of these things, and how are we making their life easier throughout the design process? The second part of that on 96 probably is schedule. This was a large project, and we were tasked with a pretty aggressive schedule from the beginning. We needed to get through some preliminary concepts and begin the environmental review process in about 6 to 7 months from the time we started the contract. And the way we did that was we deployed what we called a Tiger team, where we brought in all of our discipline leads, from our design team and from the owner and the stakeholder, right? So from the state and from the city, we had everybody in the same room over several different meetings and timeframes to just, like you said before, throwing ideas out together, working through the design process to figure out what ultimately the right solution was to the project to get to that preferred alternative as soon as we could. We were able to do that in about 6 months, which is probably 2 to 3 times faster than what it would typically take had we taken what I would consider a traditional approach to that process. So it was really great to have everybody together. And those meetings were really great because we were getting input from everybody, and because everybody was involved from the ground up, everybody had concurrence and really bought into the ultimate solution. So there's no backtracking as far as what determining what the end result was going to be.
I like that. The Tiger team. That's great. No, I think the idea of just, like you said, getting everyone in the room, bouncing ideas off of each other, that's where great ideas come from. And I think the other thing that you said that's really important in the world we live in today is all this knowledge and information sharing on these large projects, right? Making sure that the knowledge is in the right place and everyone has access to it. And that's so important for driving solutions in project management. And even the ability, like, for example, you get this Tiger team together, you're brainstorming a lot of great ideas. How do you catalog those ideas, right? Take them out of that meeting, right? Put them into somewhere where people can see them and follow up on them and take action on them. To me, that's such a big part of project management that sometimes we lose because it's kind of like after the meeting, but it's critical for the next steps of the project, essentially. So, Jake, how do you balance the technical and managerial aspects of your role, particularly when you're dealing with these large projects? And I know maybe as a senior PM, maybe you're doing less technical work, but maybe you can just talk about balancing those two things.
Yeah, this is probably the hardest part of the day, is trying to find the right balance. I would love to just kind of sit down and shut the door and just do design work for a couple of weeks solid, right? And block everybody else out, right? But that's not the role. So it's really just kind of a daily reminder for myself, on these projects, we have design teams to do the design work. I happen to be the PM on this particular project, so it's my job to manage the project, put the team in the right position to do the design work and to do their jobs. So it's kind of understanding and just, like I said, a daily reminder of stay in your lane, understanding where you're best suited and where the best value you bring to the project and to the owner. So it's, in this case, it's managing this particular project. On the next one, maybe it's more technically based, but understanding and dealing with that daily balance is the struggle, but that brings variety to the day, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that it's something that we all struggle with in our industry because we grew up doing technical design and calculations. But I think a lot of us want to become the project manager and get into management. So we just have to know that we can't if you keep doing the same stuff and then you get a new position, you're going to have more stuff. You're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to handle it. So it's just a learning process and a learning curve. So what final piece of advice might you share with consulting professionals out there who do want to excel in managing these really large project teams and develop as a PM?
I'd say a couple things. Be a good engineer first. I think in this world, you can't fake your knowledge of engineering. I think it's really hard to be a really good project engineer, especially on a large project, if you don't have that good foundation of what it takes to design or do the engineering of it, right? So I think it's one of the things I tell our folks here in the office, probably more than they like to hear, is focus on your foundation. Spend the time to learn your craft, and those management opportunities will come, right? And then I think it's, if you want to be a PM, there's lots of people looking for project managers. So ask your PM for more responsibility, more opportunities to get involved and see how things work on the management side of things in small bites. And then as you excel, you're going to get more and more as you build that trust. And then probably the last piece that has come up on this project, on the 96 project more than any other, is be a good public speaker. That communication, not only within your team, is so important, and to the owner and to the clients, to be able to communicate design intent and where projects are and how projects are going is critical. But anymore, these projects have such a big component on the public and the public outreach, and being able to, again, communicate the vision of the project and how it's going to benefit the community, I think is so important to help garner that support for the project from the general public.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think the idea of being able to communicate that public speaking, I mean, and when we say public speaking, you could be doing it in front of 3 people, right? We're not talking about 300 people, and you need to be able to communicate as a PM, and that's really critical in your ability to influence people, get your ideas across, get in front of other stakeholders, sell the project in different ways. So some really good takeaways there. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with Jake, and we're going to wrap up with our PM Pitfall segment. We'll be right back. All right, so we're back with Jake Borchers. Jake is a licensed PE, a PMP, senior PM, and VP at WSP USA. We've had a really good conversation around leading project teams on large projects, things you should think about. Jake, the last question I have for you today is, what would you say is the biggest PM pitfall that you've seen, and how would you recommend overcoming it or avoiding it for those PMs listening?
I think the biggest thing that I've seen and I've experienced it myself is either the inability or the lack of wanting to delegate to other folks and trying to just hang on to everything, do everything ourselves. You know, even though I'm the PM, I can still do all of the other things from a design perspective, or I can do all of these things. In reality, you can't. You're going to fail at something. Quality is going to suffer, whether it's, you know, your design's not great, or you're failing on the management side, or you're really driving your team crazy because you're doing everything yourself. Why do you have a team if you're going to do everything, right? So I think that's been the biggest thing, and just finding a way, overcoming that fear, that hurdle, to give your team the opportunity and have faith in them that you've trained them, or that they're smart enough, or that they have the ability to do the things that you're asking them to do. And I think as you do that, they'll appreciate it. They'll want to do more as they see the opportunities grow, and as you support them in those and provide the framework and the opportunities and the ability to do that. I think that's just going to continue to grow, and that allows you to focus on some of the other things that you're better suited to do. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen.
Absolutely. I think that the phrase that's derailed the most technical professionals going into management is, it's just quicker and easier to do it myself.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And it is the first, couple of times you do it, but if it's something you're going to have to do 100 times over the next couple of years, you're much better off investing in training someone. And Jake makes the point of what I like to say is developmental delegation, right? Like, you're also allowing people to try new things and exercise new skills when you delegate to them, and they need that to grow too. So it's not just about you getting some things off your plate. It's about you growing your team members so they can more comfortably take some of those things away from you, and you can start to do some of the higher level things that you just need to do at this point of your career. So Jake, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the AEC PM podcast. You gave us some great tips and information, and we really appreciate the time.
Great. Thank you. I've appreciated it. It's been fun.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jake. He gave a lot of great strategies for leading teams effectively, which is something we need to do as project managers. If you liked it, please subscribe here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better project managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.